companies, the second ingredient has been getting the right people on the bus. Making sure they're in the right places in the right seats. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Singleton and Teledyne we were talking about. Thank you for the reference. Very successful, building his whole company as we talked. Teledyne, huge company. But this was the genius with 1,000 helpers. This was not a team that ran itself. So when he exited, the helpers didn't know what to do. They were headless, basically. And that's what some of the larger than life leaders tend to end up happening around them. So even if they're wonderful, and they carry a whole huge amount of burden on themselves, the problem is there's no institution behind them. Other findings, it's not, I know you can't read it, sorry about that. It's not who you pay. It is about who you pay, not how you pay them. Big bonuses, executive comp, turns out to have no significant correlation. You have to be competitive pay, certainly. But it was a question of who are the people you had on board that made the difference, not what was your compensation strategy. Huge variable bonuses, upside on this, upside on that, MBO driven, no correlation whatsoever. It was about the right people having a passion for that business, wanting to make a difference that mattered, not instead financial incentives to tell them to make it happen. The carrot and the stick didn't quite work. They intrinsically wanted to do it or not. They talk about Nucor's hiring strategy. Nucor, again, Nuclear Corporation went into steel. They made a it's very interesting reading. Nucor basically chose to do hiring very carefully. They believed that the work ethic that farmers tend to have, you wake up at dawn, go mow the backlog, go water the fields, mow the lawn, got to get all this done by 8 o'clock before the sun comes out, it gets too hot, and that discipline, that work ethic that's inculcated in them can't be changed. You can't teach it. You either have it or you don't have it. And they deliberately started a strategy. They opened a series of mini mills. So they went into mini mills very deliberately. And they chose to open them in farming towns where the work ethic already existed. Okay? And what they did is they basically worked them like crazy. They paid them well, but they worked them like crazy. And so, as one of the executives said, we hire 5, we work them like 10, we pay them like 8. But it wasn't about just saying they got these guys, they had huge turnover their first year. But it wasn't that they had bad strategy, they had very specific strategy. They didn't say people come in and we didn't take care of them. The strategy deliberately was, we want a certain kind of person. The whole system was set up for a person that was hard-driven, that had that ethic, that could carry the load. Anybody else self-weeded themselves out quickly. They just didn't make it in the first few months. They were gone. So they paid well. No union troubles. They focused on aligning, and we'll talk about that later again. They were focused on aligning workers and management very tightly, and completely flattening hierarchies and perks and so on. So there wasn't differentiation, but the work ethic was what was built around. People with that work ethic were the ones that were hired. They located their plants around that work ethic, and they focused rigorously on processes that sort of multiplied that work ethic and tended to have other kinds of people fall out. Steve Jobs, in that regard, you read his book, focus only on A+. Only A+. Doesn't matter. I want all stars. I don't care. Will not make do with anybody else. And so he chewed through a lot of people. But, the results are the results. So the focus is really absolutely about rigor and ruthlessness in hiring, in keeping the right people and getting the wrong people off. It's not about just doing layoffs for the sake of layoffs. It's about really first figuring out who are the right people for what you need to do. Very, very different. Wells Fargo acquired, forget the bank again. This is around deregulation. They, very traditional bank, good old, nice executive dining room with, the private jets and what have you. Wells pretty much knew the key that Dick Cooley already knew was deregulation means the world is going to be different. We're going to be measured like everybody else. we can't carry the perks we used to carry. All that stuff's got to go. So he ripped out the executive dining room, sold the jet, cut out all sorts of stuff, got some college dormitory catering company to come serve the food, ripped out every trapping that the bankers were used to. Right? They went and acquired this company. And they pretty much fired almost 1,600 of the top managers. Pretty much the entire workforce at the top tier, because culturally just didn't fit. They didn't feel they needed to take the time to sort of try to convert these guys over, knowing it's probably not going to succeed. They choose to act and act very quickly. Where they felt those managers were good, they fired their own man. So yes, ruthless at a level, but that ruthless was backed by specific research and rigor of the kind of person they want and the kind of culture they want, as opposed to I just want to cut costs, hire somebody, let's lay off 5,000. Very different. So in fact, Jim makes the point that most of these companies in that 15 years that they studied had no more than 1 to 2 layoffs. They had some of the highest retention rates in their industries. Right? So all the results show. You get a certain kind of culture going, you hire to that culture, you weed out people that don't fit that culture, don't let them in the door if you can. And you set up the culture so it's self-leading. But once you have the right people on the bus, you can figure out what to do. Again, I'm sorry you can't read that. But a handful of what they talk about, this is Jim Collins' summary of the rigor. Number 1, when in doubt, don't hire. The question mark, don't hire. Wait till you're absolutely certain. Number 2, if you know you need to make a change, act. You take longer, you're stealing that other person's life because you know that they're not going to succeed for you anyway. You're stealing that portion of their life, and you're not succeeding because you're just delaying something that you know is not working. No point. Wells Fargo chose to do that act right up front, first couple of days. Move on, do what you have to do. And most interestingly, you put your best people on your biggest opportunity, not your biggest problem. Talks about RJR, tobacco company. And the CEO took his top staff, put him on his international business that accounted for less than 0.5% of his revenue. Because he felt that's where the growth was. Minuscule. The guy went from owning, as an operating officer under him, went from owning 99% of the business to owning 1% of the business. Net result, they became number 1 in the world before they became number 1 in the US. Massive growth. Put your best people where the opportunities are, not where the problems are. So 2 ingredients. Level 5 leadership. Get the right people on the bus, surround yourself with the best. And the right kind of people. Because that automatically builds culture. Next piece, confront reality. Accept reality, confront reality, deal with reality. Facts are better than dreams. There's a lovely little story of, don't know the companies very well. Kroger's, of course, is the supermarket chain. Apparently A&P was also a supermarket chain. Both around the 70s, these guys were all running mom and pop grocery stores. You come in, you get, pick up your groceries, cheap grocery stores. But demand started changing. Let's say this is now in the 60s, 70s, America's come out of the world wars. That generation that was frugal, had lived through a depression, 2 world wars, they were done. So these store chains had been built in that time. Both had 50-year histories. People now wanted more choice, America's doing well. The need for putting more stuff started happening. What was the strategy followed? A&P. Very traditional company, the gentleman at the top, Ralph King, was a direct success, came after the gentleman who founded the company, the Hartford brothers. And so his whole philosophy in life was, what would Mr. Hartford have done? So as they say, Mr. Hartford remained on the board 40 years after his death. So everything this guy did was, what would Mr. Hartford have done? So when people said they wanted to do something different, well, that doesn't seem right. He had a whole picture of how the company should run that was embedded in what Mr. Hartford would have done. They actually stayed with the fact. They actually started test marketing what they call the golden key stores that were supposed to be superstores as you see them today. You come in and you have all sorts of conveniences, choices. The shelves are filled with all sorts of foreign imported and brand goodies of various sorts, as opposed to the traditional store. They actually started getting success with Golden Key. Guess what they did with that? They shut it down. They didn't like the data that it threw up. They just decided that they knew better. Kroger's on the flip side started test marketing and then went whole hog. They completely converted their business to the point they invested double their actual profits every year for 30 years to completely flip the business around. So starting with, they accepted that the reality had changed. These guys just shut their minds to it. And it's odd how much that happens. They came in with this preconceived notion of this is how the world ought to be. That data point should be, just discarded. They talked, Upjohn pharmaceutical company talked about, they started seeing bad data for one of their drugs start coming in, ignored it. Bad publicity, somebody setting us up, not really, doesn't happen. Whole bunch of denial until eventually it blows up in their face.
But Kroger's didn't do well when Walmart came.
Well, there's always competition, but they actually did pretty well in the period he studied. So as he said, he looked at 15 to 15. And then he's also looked at some of the same company that eventually died because he finished his study in 2000. Walgreens is another story. The example, the one I remember off the top of my head, he's used the same companies throughout each of these, but Walgreens has shifted their business a little later. I'd like to talk about that. So really, the point is to really accept brutal reality first, not work on hope or sort of dreams or how the world, I think the world ought to be. You first face the facts, but then you have faith to deliver. And so he talks about the Stockdale paradox. Admiral Stockdale was the highest-ranking American officer who was captured by the Vietnamese, put at the prison camp known as the Hanoi Hilton. And he was the highest-ranking officer there. Remember, that war was a dirty war. No Geneva Convention, no European countries sort of treating prisoners equally and nicely and exchanging it. No Red Cross, nothing. They were tortured. He was there for 8 years. He basically worked very hard to run the whole camp and keep everybody up. He ended up, the story is amazing. He basically, cut himself with a razor, beat himself with a stool, so they couldn't put him on television as, look how well we treat our prisoners. So they couldn't do the propaganda. He basically set up a whole series of steps for individual military officers to endure torture. Because the position was, you can't indefinitely endure torture. But he set up a system where you say, okay, after X amount of time, give up this kind of information. After X amount of time. So he basically set a milestone structure so the guys could sit down and mentally aim at a particular milestone while they're going through this sort of pain. Lived for 8 years in that thing. Came out, obviously, very well regarded, won the Congressional Medal of Honor and what have you. Created codes for the guys in solitary so they could communicate with tabs and stuff all over the place. Because these guys would shut all these guys up, no talking allowed, no nothing allowed, kept communication alive. Basically became the backbone for a lot of the stuff that happened in the Hanoi Hilton. His focus was to make sure that he could try to make the largest number of people survive this thing. But he had no idea when it's going to end. No information from the outside world, ever. Not a single day. Jim Collins talks about walking with him and talking to him about this many years later. And he says, what kept you going? What is it that helped people survive? He said the optimists are the ones that die. Because he said the optimists came into camp and they pumped themselves up and said, I'll be out by Christmas. And then Christmas came and went. He said, I'll be out by Easter. I'll be out next year. And that came and went, and I'll be out by the next year. And then they broke. And then they died. He says, we started saying, you're not going to be out by Christmas. Deal with that, and I'll go from there. So an unending belief that I will eventually prevail, but the fact is, I don't know if or when or ever I'll be out. And that's the difference. And that's what he talks about. You confront brutal reality, and you maintain an unwavering faith that you will eventually prevail. Not just some hope that says I will win and I will win this way. Data is different, but I will hope anyway. So you start with a basic reality check, and only companies that can deal with that and set up cultures for that seem to do well. And all of these companies seem to have that culture. So they had a self-effacing leader. They had teams that they built up of the best people they could find that matched their cultures. They put in cultures of really taking a look at hard reality and then adjusting to it and dealing. He gives you a handful of recipes. Leaders should lead with questions, don't lead with answers. That's a trap a lot of us fall into. Dialogue, not coercion. Not do this, but what would you like to do? Autopsies without blame. And building mechanisms that let you find problems, surface issues quickly. Let people speak their mind and their after. So if you've got the right team, you've got the best people on board, you don't want to direct them. You want to let them free.